And good morning, everyone, and I'm delighted to open the college's mental health conference, Flourishing Futures. You know, back in 2019 BC, that is before COVID, we held our first such conference focusing on providing the best mental health support, principally for our students. And I remember thinking at the time that seemed a little bit ahead of its time for the Scottish tertiary sector. Now, you fast forward, here we are in the middle of a pandemic. And this topic is now both urgent and extremely important. You know, this global health crisis has severely impacted the mental health and well-being of not only our students, but also our staff. And I think it's impacted in ways that we don't fully understand yet. You know, our students in particular, but also our most vulnerable and fragile here in Scotland and indeed around the world, have endured huge and concurrent challenges wrought by this horrible virus. And let's be clear, colleagues, previous generations of students have not faced such prolonged nor such profound disruption to their learning journeys. So I've been very impressed by the agility, the adaptability, and the sheer resilience of our 30,000 strong cohort of students here at the City of Glasgow College, struggling with lockdown, with being confined indoors. That's a real struggle, actually, if you come from a poor or an intergenerational household. They've been struggling with the loss of part-time income, struggling with digital poverty, patchy connectivity, prolonged isolation from their friends, no freshers or virtual freshers, and to compound that, demonization of students in the media in terms of being social. When was that ever acceptable? And also the limitations of remote emergency teaching, particularly a challenge for practical learners and particularly for skill acquisition. You know, Gina, last week I had the joy of presenting awards to over 1,000 students who turned up in the very roomy Royal Concert Hall. Each was tested and wearing a mask, and like the audience here today, socially distanced as they came to graduate. These were extraordinary students in extraordinary times. Now, normally each year, City of Glasgow College, we have some 16,500 students gaining their nationally recognised qualifications, and many of those will graduate in multiple ceremonies. How times have changed. You know, most of us in the room and certainly online have not had to study in a world brimming full of existential uncertainty and diminished career prospects from both a global pandemic and a climate emergency. So it's a testament to the professionalism and dedication of our brilliant lecturers and our equally brilliant support staff that now only 1 in 10 of our students has either to extend or to repeat their studies during these unprecedented and arduous times. But this saga continues. Now we have a new variant, Omicron, and it's certainly here in Scotland. We don't actually know much about it. Time and science will tell us more. So this pandemic is far, far from over. It's had a real impact on mental health and well-being, a real impact on education, and a real impact on livelihoods and on life chances. And that impact may last decades and perhaps 1 or 2 generations. You know, during COP26, we played host as Scotland Super College to VVIPs and VIPs, and amongst those was the Under-Secretary for the United Nations Operations Branch. It's the branch that delivers for the UN. It's also the branch responsible for the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And Greta Thunberg was interviewed by our students, and I was quite astounded when she feared that education has been set back 20 years. So I can only pray that our mental health efforts are only frozen for 2 years, but who knows, since we had that first conference. You know, we've come a long way in supporting our students, from the early days of pastoral care or academic counselling, and we've come a longer way to meet the multiplicity and the diversity of support needs for 21st century technological learning, for personalized learning in the twin ages of automation and longevity. You know, you might well ask, what has this pioneering institution, this next generation college, this college future-proof for the next 50 years, what have we been doing faced with such acute and chronic challenges? On the 17th of March 2020, a full week ahead of most institutions, this college pivoted online in less than 12 hours. Some 23,000 learners and 1,500 staff were digitally enabled in a very short time. We were able to lend out at that stage just under 1,000 laptops as the day we closed. The following summer, facing a second lockdown, we lent out 2,000 laptops. And this summer, to prepare for any further challenges, we were able to lend out 3,500 laptops to our students. That was a £2 million digital investment in our students. So yes, you know, we do believe in our students, and yes, we put skin in the game when it comes to the resources that they need, regardless of the challenges they faced. Moreover, we pulled together and worked more closely as a staff team. That team is known here as Team City, and we did so to focus on purpose and not on mission, to let learning flourish. That's our abiding purpose. We pulled together to focus on the student experience. That's an holistic experience, not just in the classroom, but actually not just in the council room, but the complete experience before, during, and after college. We sought to mitigate this diminished learner experience with a £3 million increase in our bursary and our discretionary funds. We're now spending 13 million on this. We put an additional 500,000 injected into our counselling services. And this pandemic has required unparalleled levels of compassion and compassionate leadership to support the health and well-being of our entire college community. The 2019 also tested our contingency planning. We were fortunate here in Glasgow that we had been preparing for COP26 for 2020. So we actually had many plans in place to go online during what we thought was only a 2-week interruption to student studies. But we further had to enhance that with scenario planning, detailing the impact at a pessimistic, a realistic, and an optimistic level for a whole variety of what we call VUCU futures. That's volatile futures, uncertain futures, complex futures, and ambiguous futures. We also had to adapt what my Vice Principal, Dr. Carney, refers to, our ABC model, anywhere, blended, and connected. We were very fortunate that we had previously moved in just a few years to our digitally enabled £228 million super campus, which incidentally had a £12 million investment in state-of-the-art infrastructure. Oh, what we would have been like if we weren't in that position. We had the hardware, we had the virtual learning environment, and actually in recent months, that virtual learning environment has been superseded with an even higher spec virtual learning environment, all in an additional £5 million in a digital transformation for a new digital sphere, a new future of blended learning and blended support. You know, as important as those investments sound, it's encouraging to get the feedback from our students. We value that feedback. And in the last survey, the majority of students, that 53%, have indicated a preference for blended learning, a mix of face-to-face teaching and virtual seminars. So it's today very gratifying that we have a mix of the physical audience and the online audience. You know, our priority during this pandemic has been steadfastly on compassion and on well-being. We've issued new guidance on home working, and also we've had a display screen equipment assessment for everyone. Anna will be keen to know that we've had a therapeutic program of CBT, support for our mental health and well-being for our managers. And we've also had mental first aid training for all, including our HR colleagues. We had this actually before lockdown, and we enhanced that. We've also a new wellbeing team, and they translate our 2030 strategy into practice, into developing and communicating and implementing those wellbeing strategies. Working collaboratively with our trade union colleagues. They also use dashboards and multiple data points to drive our decision making, to evaluate our interventions. So our approach is more empirical than it is organic. Looking after our staff, in addition, we commissioned during the pandemic a very robust external wellbeing survey that, delivered in partnership with the renowned Robertson Cooperson Company, looked at a good day at work model to ensure that the voices of our staff were truly heard, to shape yet another iteration of the college's wellbeing strategy. This whole proactive approach for our students and our staff was further enhanced to those staff working in our student accommodation areas. And this proved very critical for those students who were residing in the college for months, unable to go home, unable to get the support network of family and friends. In addition, our middle management team was trained in mental health, indeed by your good self, Dr. James, who I'm delighted to say will be speaking to you this morning. So, ladies and gentlemen, I could go on, but two things will prevent me from that. One, your attention span, and two, the time I've been allocated to this particular speech. City of Glasgow College is going from strength to strength, and I trust that our city way of inspiring and being excellent and being innovative will be role modeled by this particular important Flourishing Futures seminar. You know, as I conclude and leave some final words, because I know the minister's coming up shortly, I believe it's important to take an holistic approach to mental health and well-being. We've got some very prestigious speakers and panel members to help you with that. I'm particularly delighted that our Scottish Minister is online, and he may be slightly delayed today. But Minister, can I thank you, the First Minister, the Cabinet Secretary and the government. You're to be commended for making such a significant investment in the well-being of Scottish colleges, particularly through the Scottish Funding Council. In 2019, there was an injection of 20 million over 4 years, and that allowed for an additional 80 health and wellbeing counsellors in Scotland. This was topped up by a further targeted 4.4 million from the Funding Council to the college sector. So I warmly welcome all that funding, and I sincerely hope it survives the intense budget debates that are going on in government as we speak. So the Minister may be delayed or not able to join us, depending on how those budget debates go. And if he's not able to join us, that's a good thing, because he's defending this budget. So no pressure, Mr. Stewart, or indeed Mr. Hepburn. You know, the Scottish Government's programme for government in September announced plans to reconvene the Student Mental Health and Wellbeing Working Group to take forward the Mental Health Action Plan, and I welcome this too. So as I end, I would remind colleagues online and indeed the government of the recommendations of our Cumber for Little report, which firmly advocated for a whole systems approach. So mental health and well-being in Scotland would therefore considerably benefit from closer partnership between the tertiary and the secondary sectors, between Scottish Government and between all the government agencies, closer partnership between the NUS and institutional student associations, and closer partnership between the NHS, the third sector, and the trade unions. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to hand back at this stage to Gina, and at some stage, I hope the Minister will be able to join us this morning. Thank you very much, and I wish you well with this conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Principal. And I have to say, I love what I'm making notes. Team City, I love that. Doesn't that just make you feel like you're really part of something? And all the mental health training, etc., that you've offered students and staff, like you're so lucky. I speak humbly from someone who's freelance, no show, no dough, who had to invest in that along the way, because I've worked for organisations or companies that haven't offered that. So actually, that you're so lucky. I love the fact that we're very relaxed here. Michelle, I think, was holding me up a little sign, and I do think that actually Kevin Stewart, MSP, might be ready just now. If not, we can go to him. If not, we're going to go to Lee. Is that okay? We'll go to Lee, yeah? Just give me a thumbs up, Ali. Yeah, marvellous. Okay, so we'll go to Lee Spanner again, doing my little creeping, overseeing the work, of course, that Student Minds has, or what they do to engage with university students' unions and other generations. Lee, welcome. Can you hear me? A missed opportunity, Gina. I can do my name and sign, but that's about it. Shall we move on? Is that okay, Lee, until we can sort out that little technical issue? Yeah? Okay, yeah, okay, wonderful. Okay, then you would have heard, of course, Principal refer to Dr. Anna James. I'm so excited to hear what you've got to say, Dr. Anna. Oh my goodness me. Dr. Anna, if you don't know, Dr. Anna James is a criminologist specialising in challenging behaviours and founder of March Training and Development Limited. So please welcome to the podium, of course, Dr. Anna James.
Along this morning. So in my talk this morning, we're going to discuss how we can embed resilience into pedagogy. They weren't ready for me to come up now. We've got a presentation ready as well. It might not be up and running because I'm a little bit early on stage.
Yeah, that's okay. We can make allowances for that. So, Dr. Anna, you didn't have the pleasure of, James said to me, I'm not quite sure where to put your mic. Is it okay if we go through to the back toilet? And all these people were passing whilst the wire's going up here, this part's going around my back. There was nothing strange going on, okay? He was just helping me. There we go.
Not on yet. Thank you. Am I all on and running? I'll just check for you. Thank you. Just unmuted me. You need to go again. Like one.
This is so nice to do something during the day. I'm so used to doing things at night. So last night I was hosting the Scottish Food Awards. I take a note of all the places that have been nominated, and we've got so many places across Glasgow and the West. And normally, when, you know, there's always little things that happen. You say, "Oh, just have another glass of wine, champagne." We had a few problems last night, and let me tell you, come 9:30, everyone was sozzled. No one was paying attention. By the time I was asking winners to come onto the stage, they were like, "Oh, did we win? Oh, we'll just stay here and celebrate." No, we didn't. Like, oh my goodness me. So, yeah, during the day it's always slightly different, isn't it? Yeah, can't quite get away with that. Just have another one. Typical Glaswegian thing to say, isn't it? Oh yeah, we'll just have another one. And of course, 1st of December today, pinch punch, start of the month and all that, isn't it? Yeah. Who's got an advent calendar?
Yes.
Me? Peppa Pig? Forgive me, but am I?
Hello. Hello, can you see?
That's very thoughtful.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
There we go.
There we go. on that one.
I was telling, so I've put on 2 stone over the past 2 years. Always trying to lose weight, but it keeps finding me, yeah. And my personal trainer is a professor of criminology, and I said that I was with Dr. Anne Dane. He was like, oh, typical Glaswegian, oh, could you not get me an invite? Oh no, only special people that get to go to this event. This is the joys of pre-recording though. All this part for the DVD gets edited out, doesn't it, guys? Yeah, and it looks completely fresh where I just start again, Dr. Anne, and introduce you. I think we're almost good to go. Yeah, about 2 minutes.
You can't beat that for positive mental health.
Yes,
Bring your decks, play some music.
Different out, get a piece of music on. I say that all the time, yeah. Transcendental stuff. I've got the cam app. Do you have the cam app? Matthew McConaughey telling a bedtime story. Oh my word. Right, all right, all right.
Oh, brilliant.
Wonderful. I think we're good.
We're ready to go?
Yes. Please put your hands together, everyone, for Dr. Anna James.
Thank you, everybody. It's so lovely to see you today. It's very, very nice to be in person, to actually be able to see you face to face today. No, I can't see everybody, which is a shame, but I hope to catch up with a couple more people tomorrow. My presentation today is going to be about how we can embed resilience into pedagogy. And to start us off, I'd like to talk about maybe some of the mental health issues that might be occurring. So I don't want to go through the disorders and the mental health labels, but I would like to discuss some of the challenges that some of our young people have been through. So if you want to put my presentation on now, that would be wonderful. And I'll just start talking through it while they're getting that organised. It might be a little bit delayed because I know they had struggle getting hold of that. So one of the first things that we might want to think about is the fact that, you know, learners' whole setup has changed quite substantially. And if you look at, for example, learners with ADHD, a learner with ADHD already has an enlarged amygdala. Now, the amygdala of the brain is very, very important in teenagers anyway. It's enlarged in ADHD brains, but it's just awkward in the teenage brain. And it's awkward for a deliberate reason, because actually what we want teenagers to do, and the amygdala is the part of the brain that deals with emotion, it deals with, you know, why we tend to react difficult in a certain situation. It's all those things that make teenagers what they are. It's why they go to sleep when they're 11 and they're all sweet and they're like, I absolutely love you, mummy and daddy. And then they wake up in the morning and they're like, you know, mum, dad, you know, you're driving me crazy. Now, so your average teenage brain, it's going to be a difficulty anyway, something like lockdown. And one of the really interesting things that maybe we might want to reflect on, and don't forget, none of this is based on research. This is just based on stuff that at the moment as psychologists we're looking at and we're really trying to understand. So one of the things that could be occurring, number one, is that the teenage brain might not actually have developed over the last couple of years in the way that we might think. Because as that amygdala is ruling the teenage brain, it rules it to help develop the prefrontal cortex. This is this front part of the brain. And it's the last part of the teenage brain to develop for absolute deliberate reason, because we don't want teenagers to be too rational. We actually need them to be a little bit moody, and we need them to take risks, because it's risk-taking that develops neural networks. Now, if teenagers over lockdown haven't been able to take risks, like coming to college, doing presentations, meeting new friends, and talking to you as staff, then there's a real issue in terms of those neural networks being developed. One of the interesting things that might be happening is we might not, in terms of IQ, but in terms of emotion, be teaching people that emotionally are a little bit younger than we would expect them to be. So I think that's one issue. I think the second one is that if you've got a learner with ADHD, not only is that amygdala awkward, should we just put it that way, because of the teenage years, it's also bigger in the ADHD brain. It's one of the reasons why we get the behaviours with ADHD that we get, because, you know, when you've got an enlarged amygdala, you can imagine that you're going to react worse to situations that might occur. You're going to struggle more. Now, as you go into lockdown and you've got the threat of something like COVID, you've also got the added addition to the fact that you've got a heightened awareness. You're going to have more fear because the amygdala deals with fear. So in anybody that's got ADHD, they're going to really struggle with the fact that they've gone through these times, and actually there's a real issue in terms of how they might have felt within the situation, and the ricocheting effect back on their mental health could be much worse. So guarding and safeguarding our ADHD students at the moment, I think, is a really important aspect. I would also say, and I'm just talking ad lib now because I've noticed that the presentation still hasn't come up, but I'm guessing that will come up at some point, that we can also see that there have been neurological changes. Now, the reason for that is because when we are face-to-face, as we are here, the brain is stimulated and the brain's thinking, oh, right, okay, Gillian, there's this, there's Vanessa, there's John, there's Joe, there's Jack. And the brain starts to go into sussing things out. It starts to warn itself, and it's engaged and it's interested. When we look at a flat screen, even when we're looking on Zoom, it is a flat screen, whether you like it or not. Even though there are people in front of you, it is a flat screen. And actually the brain is kind of like, oh, okay, it's the television. It's exactly like when we watch the television. You know, whether we like it or not, Keanu Reeves is not going to come through that screen and start charming us in any way in real life. He is behind that screen. And that's the reality of how our brains are processing. So what's actually happened, some research is suggesting, is our brains have actually been dulled, completely dulled. And the thought of that is absolutely horrendous, that we've gone through lockdown and we've ended up with kind of like this dulled existence because we haven't had the normal engagement that we would expect. Now, that's going to cause real issues in terms of the way that learners might behave in the classroom, because they just won't practice the behaviours that they might require to survive a classroom situation. The other side to that is our own behaviours and how we might be feeling within a situation, because of course we will have lost some of our coping mechanisms for managing learners face to face. But there's another more serious thing that has happened to the brain, and that is that some of us, regardless of whether we have had COVID, are developing what's called a brain fog. Right? And that's quite an extreme feeling of tiredness. We are struggling, we are not sleeping, and sleep deprivation is quite a severe mental health, not problem, but I'd say issue probably at the moment, where so many people's sleep patterns have been really messed up that they are struggling. So people are coming in to work finally face to face, they're coming into class, and this brain fog, they just can't focus, they can't memorise. So all the normal things that your learners would be able to do much, much quicker are really affecting the brain to do its normal actions. Now, on top of that, we also know that some learners had a lovely lockdown. Their parents were organised, they took them on walks every day, and they probably bonded. And there's some neural networks that have improved massively, and there's been a lovely bonding in some families that has occurred. Sorry, excuse me. But in some families, they experienced chaos during lockdown, and they were scared. They were really scared, and understandably so. Some people struggled to get hold of food for all different reasons, and there was a real survival mechanism that kicked in. Now, we also know that when the brain has gone through that kind of trauma, that sometimes that can affect the hippocampi. And actually what you're really looking at, and I'll explain what I mean by hippocampi in a minute, but what we are really looking at is the fact that some of our learners come from trauma. Before COVID, they came from trauma anyway. And the traumatized brain, possibly, not always, and we have to make it clear that this is possibly. So if you go one slide back, that would be lovely. So back rather than forwards. Then what happens to the brain when it's been traumatized is, again, it starts to physiologically change. This is actually something quite difficult when you think about it, that you can have a child that's been through trauma, they arrive at our front door in the college, and actually the hippocampus, which is the part of the brain where we memorize, it's the part of the brain that processes memories and shoots memories out to the neocortex around here, that part of the brain can literally shrink. So if you've got a learner that has gone through trauma and their amygdala has been affected previously by trauma, their hippocampus has shrunken, then lockdown would have had a severe effect on that learner. And one of the things that we're really noticing in colleges is learners just aren't doing their usual. I mean, it does take a long time sometimes for learners to memorise. And I have this 3-prong attack that I use, where I say we need to present things in 3 ways. So you might do a little bit of a YouTube clip, you might do a mini presentation, and you might do some group work all around the same minor topic, so that the teenager can really process that, or the adult learner, whoever it might be. But actually, if you've got this shrunken hippocampi that may have been made worse during COVID, you're going to have to go even further than that. The 3-prong attack, even so, might not be enough. So thinking about constant repetition of information, and even as far as our schemes of work, we need to be very clever in terms of how we interleave our schemes of work. In the old days, we wrote schemes of work so they were blocked. That's not necessarily healthy in terms of memorization, just in average times, let alone post-COVID. But now much more thought about how can I interleave my scheme of work? How can I make sure that as I am visiting subjects, that I'm constantly coming back to those topics and revisiting on a constant basis all throughout the year. So not blocking our schemes of work in the same way. Now, if you go back couple of more slides so that we can, one more slide, please. Sorry, whoever's up there. That's wonderful. So if you just stay there, that will do absolutely fine. Oh, actually, sorry, could you go one more back? So I just want to show people the QR code. So one more back. That's it. Now, just for those that are on Zoom, I just want to give you the opportunity to scan this QR code and just to explain how this has been organised. So I'm going to talk to you in a minute about lessons, and about 5 lessons to embed resilience skills, and then 5 lessons to actually openly target some of the skills that are to do with mental health. Okay. And one of the things that I've tried to do today is not over talk mental health, because I think it's important to train young people on what mental health is and on what wellness is, even more importantly. But I think if you over talk it, you could literally talk somebody into having a mental health condition. It's a little bit like I always use the example that if you said to me today, oh, I'm a bit tired, and I went, oh, you poor thing, you're absolutely exhausted, you go away thinking, oh my gosh, yes, I'm exhausted. So you kind of talk people into things that they don't necessarily need to think about. And I think it's much healthier that we talk about resilience, but we have mental health training that runs alongside that. So what we've tried to do is the QR code leads to a Trello board. And on that Trello board are all the resources of the lessons that I'm giving you today. So we've done animations. We've tried to do it in a very easy way so you can just apply it to your subject area. There can be a little starter animation that introduces the topic, which any subject could use. You can then tailor the case studies to your specific vocational area, whether you're English, maths, etc. So you can just download what you need. On that Trello board, you just go on, look for the 3 dots. I know they've got a technical name, but I can't remember them. And you just download from there. So everything I'm going to show you today, don't worry, because you will have access to it. And in the booklet, I've given you all the strategies that go with these lessons. So although I'm going to talk through it fairly quickly, all the strategies are in there that you can utilize. So we can go forward now with the presentation. So I can do my Boris thing now with next slide, please. Thank you. Next slide, please. Yes, you can hold it there. Oh no, you've gone too far. Come on now. Right, that's it. Thank you. So the first lesson is about embracing fear. Right. So again, as I said, I'm not going to directly talk about mental health, but one of the things that causes things like anxiety manifesting, things like stress, which obviously is not mental health. Stress is just a human bodily reaction. And it's very, very important that we let learners know the difference between the two. And I'll talk about that in a minute, because that's one of the lessons that I've developed. So it's about understanding the fact that fear it's good. You know, if you feel fear, for a start, it proves that you're not a psychopath. So there's a positive. And fear is a human reaction that we should feel. It's something that we should embrace, and it's something that shows that we've got challenges in our life, and that has to be a good thing. And if you do want to have a look at the booklet, this lesson is between pages 6 and 9. So the way in which we would build resilience in this lesson is, you know, learners need to know that fear is a neuro reaction. And as I've said, teenagers struggle with reasoning because this prefrontal cortex is not fully developed. It's the prefrontal cortex that says to you, I need to be calm here. Okay, my manager has just criticized me, but I don't need to lose it. I need to think, like, okay, that's fine. I can cope with that. That's absolutely fine. Your prefrontal cortex keeps you calm within a situation. Bearing in mind that's not developed in the teenage brain, hence why we get the conversations that we sometimes do and the sorts of behaviors that we sometimes do, then we've got to make sure that that part of the brain is developed as quickly as it can be to prepare for university or to prepare for the workplace. Now, bearing in mind lockdown, my own personal view is that we need to work harder on advancing some of these neural networks at the moment. Learners, I think, have been left behind, as Paul was saying, and I think we need to make sure that we do some more intense work to catch them up. But I still want to use my vocational subject to do that. I don't want you as tutors to think, well, I've got to go forward and teach resilience skills as an extra to my lesson. I think the most effective way of even embedding equality and diversity, all of those things are much better embedded, like English and maths, when you actually teach it in your vocational area. It doesn't work when you just suddenly plonk something in the middle of the lesson, because actually that stresses learners out in itself. Now, the pedagogy, because obviously we're talking about pedagogy today as well, and trying to connect and think further about the way that we are utilising our pedagogies. And I've used Piaget's constructivism for this one. And it's a really lovely one for this lesson, because constructivism is about, it's that recognition that we've gone beyond behaviourism of the sort of Victorian classroom, and we've moved into understanding the fact that learners learn better when they've got real life experiences and they can actually try things that are authentic, and they can work in groups and they can explore things together. So if we go on to the next slide, we'll just have a little look at this particular lesson plan. So the lesson objectives that I've put down are: realise fear is rational, it's absolutely fine. You know, as part of as learners are feeling that, hopefully it will calm them down a little bit. Practice techniques for managing workplace scenarios, and relate this to everyday life. So that's where, when we're using our vocational subject as an example, we can just have a nice relaxed conversation about, oh, well, if this was real life in your own personal life, how might you utilise some of these skills? So I've got a great animation on how the brain shows fear and how the amygdala works that we can show learners. And I really teach my learners about the amygdala, and I say to them, your amygdalas are driving me mad today. And I try and sort of have a humour with them about it so they recognise what they are doing. Hold on, I think we've gone too far forward, haven't we? So yeah, we need to go one back. Look at that, thinking that's not processing in my brain. So we've got an animation. Task 2, provide some vocationally based scenarios, which I've written up for you. You can tailor those in any way that you want to in the book. Have a class debate around whether those scenarios are being dealt with properly. And then as part of that, and as part of dealing with fear, we really need to be able to give some techniques. And a really great type of technique is what we call grounding techniques. And actually, once you've taught learners the grounding techniques for fear, they can be used for anything. They can be used for stress. They can be used if learners are getting anxious about an exam. You know, they're just really nice things to calm the fear part of the brain. Really simple things like cold water, running your hands through cold water. Your amygdala is like, oh, hold on, what's going on here? Right, and it kind of changes the action of what's happening. The method of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, so simple to teach learners. You know, as they're starting to get anxious or fearful or whatever it might be, they think of 5 things around them. They think of 4 smells. They think of 3 sights. So they think of things that, again, the amygdala calms right down. And although you might still feel fear, not in the same ways. And really, this is about teaching that in my vocational career, emergencies will happen. You know, the example I've given is an emergency presentation or an emergency job that needs to be done. Look at what the students are going through today. You know, it's about how do you cope with that scenario, but you also keep calm so that your prefrontal cortex can do its work. And another great one is just to get somebody to hold ice. That's used a lot in mental health, ice. Now, you might be thinking it was hard for me to get ice around the college, but we can certainly get hold of water. And there's a whole list of ideas in the booklet. So really simple things that just straight away calm the brain down and actually make the brain react. And even something as simple as taking your thumb and putting your thumbnail into your palm and just slightly pinching yourself teaches the learner that can control crying. Again, it can control fear. It just makes your brain think, oh, that's weird, what's going on? And it takes the emotional aspect and brings you more into a logical aspect. So we can go on to the next slide now, please. Next slide. Thank you. When you're ready. Thank you. Right, so the next one is to get ready to embrace and enjoy change. I'll just go through this very quickly, but of course what we hope for our learners is they will go through lots of change as they get older. And unfortunately, change is one of those big things in life that really does cause stress. And don't forget what we're trying to achieve here. We're trying to make sure that we set our learners up, not with just the right skills for university or for the workplace. We're trying to make sure that our learners have a whole bank of skills that go beyond academia and their vocational skills, and actually give them a bank of resources they can utilise for everyday life. One of the really sad things, this is what we're really trying to fight here, is that 70% of mental health issues start before somebody is 18 years old, so 70%. So that means that they manifest and they sit on the brain. And it depends on your adulthood and your experiences as to whether those mental health issues will come out. It's actually one of the reasons why we have had such a spurt in mental health issues, because people have these dormant issues lying on their brains. And of course, the fear of lockdown has brought those mental health issues out. Now, this is the key to this, that as those mental health issues lie dormant, if you can give learners these strategies to deal with practical life things such as change, then actually you could literally prevent some of those mental health issues from coming out later on. So you can give learners the strength to think, okay, I'm going through massive change here. I'm going through a divorce, I'm going through a job change, I'm moving house, all at the same time. But you know what? I remember what Joe told me in that class, and these are the couple of strategies that I'm going to follow. And we could actually prevent a mental health issue that might be lying dormant and might be very, very low level that the person is managing from becoming something much worse. And that's what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to make sure that we give learners that bag of tricks that they can pull out whenever they might need it. Now, for this lesson, I've chosen Vygotsky's social constructivism, and he talks about, as you all know, the zone of proximal development. And he uses the 4 strategies of modelling, questioning, independent and automation. So if you go to the next slide, please, I'll just talk you through that. So it's a lovely pedagogy for this subject. So sorry, next slide, please, if you don't mind. Don't know whether there's just a delay or whether they're not hearing me up in the... And as we go through that, you'll notice that in the booklet, I've given you a whole list and really marked out how you would do the lesson. Thank you very much. Now, the lesson objectives, recognising that change is inevitable, I hope it is for the learners. I really, really hope that they go through lots of changes and they are really exciting changes. Take away strategies to manage change. You know, whether we like it or not, the brain panics when we experience change. I mean, for some staff, you might move their desk from one side of the room near a window, and there will be an analysis of that. Oh, I don't know. There's a lot of sunlight over there. So, you know, it's looking at how our brains react to that. And it's natural. Of course, your brain is going to look and think, oh, I'm not sure about that. So our brains don't always react well to change. And the secret in terms of neurology is making sure that our dopamine goes to the part of the brain where we feel excited, rather than the part of the brain where the dopal area of the brain where we start to feel dread and fear. And I've created an animation for you about a guy called John. He's 31 years old, and he is having a baby with his partner, and they're really excited. Everything's great. Then he suddenly starts to realise there are massive changes going on in his life. He has to move house. He has to get rid of his 2-seater car. There's all sorts of things that are going on in his life. And it's really about, well, for the learners to analyse, how could John deal with the situation that he's in? And as you go through the animation that I've created, there's lots of strategies, but there's room in the lesson for learners to come up with their own strategies as well. And actually, as we go through it and we're using the zone of proximal development, the animation is the first one where we're modelling. We then question using higher order questioning. And the great thing about higher order activities is they make embedding so much easier. When I use lower order, it's very difficult to embed, very difficult. When I use higher order, like synthesis, creativity, etc., so much easier to embed into my lessons. And then I'm going on to the learner, starting to process it for subject-based problem solving. And then finally, I interleave my scheme of work for automatization. So I want to go on to the next one. So we could go to the next slide. Oh, actually, I could show you a little bit of the animation I've created, but I will tell you to turn it off. So I'll just play a few seconds of it. Okay, I won't play a few seconds of it, that's absolutely fine. But you can see that the animation was there. And as I say, all these animations are on the Trello board, you can download them and start playing them. Idea 3 is called Oranges from Valencia, and it's about negotiation. And the two teams get a group of oranges and they basically have to negotiate them. And in your booklet, you'll notice that I've given you a whole list of negotiation techniques that you can pass on to your learners. And it's really about teaching the learners that conflict is not pleasant. It is not pleasant at all. But one of the reasons why it's not pleasant, and I have to teach this to staff all the time, is because we label it as conflict. You can actually have quite a difficult conversation, but it doesn't mean that, you know, you're going to be in conflict. Just because you have to say to somebody, I don't agree with that and I find that quite difficult, doesn't mean that it's an argument. And it's training learners about their tone, about the sorts of language that they use and the body language that they use. And it's making them confident to say, oh, do you know what? If you did do this idea, you know, West College Scotland do this. So what do you think of it? Yeah. So you're kind of negotiating, you're giving little tips. Okay, yeah, no problem. And you're letting people know that, you know, what it is that they can do to get out of conflict. So we're going to push on. Can I just ask how many minutes have I got? 3 minutes? Okay, so we'll go on. So let's miss the next one and we'll go on a couple of slides. So let's go on a couple of slides. We'll miss Lesson in the TARDIS because I'm always going on about Doctor Who to you. I know I am. And then finally, the last one, and I'll just say a couple more if you don't mind, is communication skills to help assertion. So this is where we start really talking about what we're doing in the toolkit. And just to quickly mention that there is a toolkit being developed, as Paul mentioned, being led by Gillian Plunkett. I think it's a brilliant idea. And it's this idea that, you know, there's going to be lessons there that anybody can pick up, and a little bit like I've been trying to show you today. And one of the ones that I'm really keen for us to develop is letting learners understand the 4 pillars of development, of resilience, sorry. And when you've got these 4 strong pillars and you can understand them in terms of skills for your vocational course, like taking a healthy packed lunch, comes under the pillar of being physically well. Knowing how to talk reasonably and knowing how to be polite and knowing a little bit of customer care for everybody is one of the social pillars of resilience. And if we can graduate learners with the basics of these pillars, we're giving them such a head start. I mean, how many of us can think back to our first year of work and all the horrible mistakes we made and the politically incorrect things we said and all those things because we weren't given the right guidance? It's making sure that learners have that guidance, again, to really help their resilience skills later on in life. Now, if you just flip forward again, so just flip forward a couple of, another one, if you don't mind. So another one. I've also put together just basic lessons of things that I think are going on at the moment. So I'm seeing a lot of self-sabotage of learners are coming in and they're deliberately destroying their assessments. They're deliberately tearing, you know, sheets out of their books because they don't want their tutor to mark their work. There's so much where learners don't want to have to face you seeing their work, and they're literally self-sabotaging to do it. And worse than that, in observations, I'm seeing people being complimented and then deliberately doing something difficult because it's their identity they feel is being affected. So it's almost like, you know, the positive is leading to a negative for them. So one of the things that maybe we can do with learners, and I've come up with a whole tutorial on this, is look at how we can deal with self-sabotage, because that really is a huge issue for some learners. Going on to the next slide. Next slide, please. How does stress make you feel? So there's a little animation there again that I've created. So all of these have got animations to go so that as the tutor, you don't have to actually teach the topic. You can just do debates around it. And these are just, this is really good for foundation learners, teaches you the basic vocabulary of stress and teaches the learners stress is normal. You should feel stress. You know, if you never get stressed, it means there's something wrong with the way that your physiology is working. And actually there's a big difference between stress and anxiety. So that lesson is really about don't fear stress. You do get butterflies when you're stressed. You do get jittery. You do get a bit shaky. And embrace that. That's great. They're the things that give you energy. They're the things that make you a more interesting person. Let's just do one more. Right, this picture does not fit the topic at all today, but I just loved it so much. I thought I have to put that in my presentation. So this is about a beginner's guide to having good self-esteem. And I think most of you will agree there's a little bit of an issue in terms of self-esteem. And that goes back to the neurology that I was talking about. You know, learners' brains have not developed. The self-esteem part is part of that front part of the brain. And the fact that we learners have not developed that part of the brain means that, again, we need some really intense work in developing self-esteem in our learners. And there is another one that is about the difference between stress and anxiety. And just to quickly finalise, just so that you understand how this sort of session works, that in the booklet, each of these lessons has strategies that you can go through, really simple ones that you can engage with your learners, like the FAST technique, where you teach a learner to freeze, think of an alternative technique, and then adopt that alternative technique. So really simple things that will calm your learners, but really, really work on their neurology and fixing some of those neural paths and getting learners back on track, which I really believe that in an environment like this, we've got a real good chance of doing. And I will finish up there. Thank you so much, everybody.
Oh my word. Well, I don't know about you, I'm quite sure I could listen to Dr. and James forever. I think you should just have your own talking radio show, and then that would be bumped out of radio. But that would be amazing. I think you actually have those facilities on the campus, student radio. It would be amazing. Oh, so many questions. If you have any questions, please keep them coming. I've got so many. Delighted to say that we now can move to Kevin Stewart, MSP, Minister for Mental Wellbeing and Social Care. And I do believe you will be joining us now. Good morning.
Good morning. Hello.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you now, Gina.
Thank you very much. I know we had a slight delay, but that's okay. I don't know if you managed to listen to what Principal Paul Little had to say, or indeed Dr. Anna James. I know you're a very busy man, but delighted to have you with us.
Lost you again, Gina.
Oh, I'm back. Don't worry. That's usual. Where are you, Gina? Are we back? Are we back in the
I can hear you fine.
That was the mention of Doctor Who. That's what happened there, wasn't it, Doctor? That was the very mention of Doctor Who and the Gremlins come in. Okay, I'm going to pass it to you then now, Kevin Stewart, and just check that you can hear me clearly.
I can hear you, and I'll just continue on, Gina, if that's okay.
Wonderful, yeah, looking forward to listening to you.
I was listening earlier to Dr. Little stalling for me while I was on the Zoom link rather than on the link that I'm now on. So I'm here, good morning, and thank you for your kind invitation to attend today's Flourishing Futures Mental Health Conference hosted by the Neurological College. Thank you also for giving me this opportunity to welcome delegates and to say a few words about what the Scottish Government are doing on student mental health and well-being, and how this aligns with the launch of the Building Student Resilient Toolkit here today. Prior to the pandemic, the Scottish Government published the Mental Health Strategy 2017 to 2027. The strategy recognised that many mental health problems are preventable and almost all are treatable, so people can either fully recover or manage their conditions successfully and live healthy, happy and productive lives. Our vision for the mental health strategy was and remains building a Scotland where people can get the right help at the right time, expect recovery and fully enjoy their rights free from discrimination and stigma. Student mental health and well-being is an area of key concern for the Scottish Government, and this was outlined in that mental health strategy. However, we are clear that the COVID-19 pandemic has changed the priorities of all of our citizens, and in particular has had a significant impact on students, teachers and institutions. To address this, in October of last year, the government published the Coronavirus Mental Health Transition and Recovery Plan, which outlines the government's response to the mental health impacts of COVID-19. The plan addresses the challenges that the pandemic has created and will continue to have on our population's mental health. The plan also underscores the importance of student mental health and well-being, seeking to address some of the challenges students continue to face as a consequence of the pandemic. The plan itself is supported by £120 million Recovery and Renewal Fund, which will transform services with a renewed focus on prevention and early intervention. During the pandemic, the Scottish Government provided colleges and universities with an additional £1.32 million to help mitigate the impact of COVID-19. And earlier this year, we also announced an additional £4.4 million of funding for colleges to help college students, staff, to deal with the impact of the pandemic. And guidance on this was published by the Scottish Funding Council in the summer. An additional £750,000 was also provided to NUS Scotland and colleges and university student associations to help in their work with working students. And we have also continued to support NUS Scotland through our continued investment in the Think Positive initiative, which has led to the development of student mental health agreements in institutions across Scotland. And through the project, NUS will also launch an online hub for students containing mental health resources, information, and student mental health agreements from institutions across Scotland early in the new year. But as well as this COVID-19 specific support, we're also investing in a number of activities as part of our wider commitment to improving mental health support for students. Since 2019-20, the government has invested over £11 million as part of our commitment to introduce more than 80 additional counsellors in colleges and universities across Scotland. And in doing so, we have been careful to address the issue of equity of access to counsellors for college students with no detriment to universities. We've also allocated £15 million to local authorities to provide new and enhanced community mental health and wellbeing services for 5 to 24-year-olds for their families and carers across the country. Services which students can access locally when they need additional support. But despite all of this progress, we know there is further to go and that we must continue to engage with institutions and students to ensure the right range of support measures are in place across Scotland. And in November, phase 1 of the Thriving Learner research study conducted by the Mental Health Foundation was published. And this research clearly shows us that in some areas that we have further to go to ensure we're getting that support right for students across Scotland. And to address this publication, together with other evaluation evidence and research, and phase 2 of the Thriving Learners work, which will focus on further education and colleges, will inform our future work. This future work will include the development of a Scottish Student Mental Health Action Plan, which we will need to develop in the sector to meet the current and future needs of all of our students. So in line with this ambition to improve the mental well-being of all of our students and to listen directly to their voices, I'm delighted to be here today and to introduce the Building Student Resilience Toolkit. I'm told that the idea behind the Building Student Resilience Toolkit was developed from the college's mental health charter, and it is a whole college approach to supporting critical student experiences. Experiences such as the transition to college and embedding measures to create supportive positive transition, as well as building student confidence and resilience by promoting well-being, planning academic integration, and creating social connectedness. I know that this kind of person-centered approach is critical to the conditions for promoting well-being and building resilience. And I think that all of those here today and across the higher education sector who contributed to the toolkit's development deserve to be recognised for the work that they have done building and implementing this important tool, And I hope that that good practice like this can be exported and shared across Scotland to benefit all of our students. Finally, I know that there are a range of speakers here today who will be providing some interesting insight into some of the challenges and opportunities that we all face. However, I'd like to remind all of the attendees that this is also an opportunity for you to make your voices heard loud and clear, and to pose questions to the experts. And I'm told that the best way for you to do this is by interacting in the live speakers corner session at the end of the event. I hope that you all enjoy the conference this morning and wish you all of the very best with all of your future work. Thank you very much, Gina.
Oh, wow, round of applause. Thank you very much, Kevin, Stewart, MSP. And on that note, as Kevin said, then, you know, this is your time too. If you're online or indeed here, if you've got any questions, then please keep them coming. When you think of the world that we live in, social media, people are already tweeting, putting on Insta, maybe not Tinder, that's the first thing that came to my mind there, but you get what I mean. Then please keep the questions coming. I think we will go back to Elise Banner after our break. Of course, Alex Lavia will be chatting online as well, Matt Crilly, and then our panel, Dr. Claire Carney, Dr. Anna Jones, and Gillian Plunkett as well. So please keep those questions coming. So we will have a very short break, just for 5 to 10 minutes, and then we will be back. So go grab yourself, I don't know, a breakfast bagel, whatever you might have, muffin, a cup of tea, and then we'll be back in 10 minutes.